When we were children, every summer meant being sent out of the capital city. My parents thought it was good for us. A break from the concrete jungle, the traffic, the endless gray buildings. And yes, the countryside was beautiful. Green fields stretched out to the horizon. Bamboo groves swayed behind the houses, and the air smelled of earth and rain. But to us kids, beauty didn't mean excitement. There wasn't much fun to be had. And the countryside house only made it worse. A long courtyard stretched between the buildings, with tiled roofs leaning toward each other so that half the yard was always in dimness. Right in the middle of the courtyard sat a well, its stone cover always in place. To an adult, it was just part of country life. But to us, it was the thing that made the house feel even scarier, the one place you'd avoid if you could. There was nothing playful about a dark hole in the ground surrounded by the hush of the yard. In the daytime, everything felt ordinary. All of us cousins were home for summer break, and the courtyard was loud with games. We ran across the yard, caught grasshoppers, and climbed the bamboo poles until the grown-ups yelled at us. My youngest brother, only 5 that year, was always in the middle of it, his laughter the loudest of all. But at night, the house changed. Once the lamps were blown out, the rooms sank into a silence, deeper than the world outside. The courtyard that had been noisy all day turned silent, thick with the weight of night that seemed to hold their breath. We lay under our thin quilts listening to the crickets and the creak of the roof beams, waiting for sleep to come. None of us wanted to go outside in that oppressive blackness. That summer slipped by. Bright days, long nights, nothing unusual. At least that's what I thought. I never liked leaving my mat at night in that house. Capital city that never truly slept, noisy even after midnight. But in the countryside, the stillness seemed to ring in your ears and made every little sound stand out. The wings of a moth brushing paper, the creak of a roof beam, the steady sound of your own breath. The toilet was outside, past the edge of the courtyard, and I always tried to wait until morning. But that night, I couldn't. My stomach hurt from holding it, and I lay awake, listening to the crickets scratching in the fields, until I had no choice. I slid the wooden door open, wincing at the loud groan it made, and stepped barefoot onto the cold tiles. The night was cool and damp, thick with the smell of soil, and the faint, sour odor of the well in the center of the yard. Moonlight spilled across the courtyard, cutting sharp lines between the tiled roofs and the dim ground below. That was when I saw him, and my heart stopped. It was my little brother, 5 years old, in his thin pajamas, crouched by the well as if he was playing marbles. His back was to me, his shoulders hunched, but I could hear him giggling softly. Not a nervous laugh, not frightened, real giggles. The kind that come when you're genuinely having fun. My chest tightened, and something in me held back from calling out immediately. The place felt wrong. Almost a dream, where everything looked the same but wasn't. The silhouette wavered when I stared too long, and even the bamboo outside the walls rattled as though someone were hiding there. Listening. I crept closer, hugging my arms to myself. Every step a loud echo in my own ears. The stones were cold under my feet, and the air smelled sharper near the well, carrying the scent of wet stone and mildew. Who are you talking to? I whispered, my words thinner than I expected. He turned toward me with a bright, easy smile. Cousin Ajun, he said simply. And it seemed to him that was explanation enough. She wanted to play. But that was impossible. I had just left her in our room. She remained asleep on the mat beside me, breathing slow and steady. I knew, because I had watched her for a moment and hoped she would wake, before I slid the door open. And yet, here was my little brother, eyes shining in the moonlight, laughing. His joy making it seem she was sitting right there, in the shadows beside him. My skin prickled all over, and I didn't wait another second. I grabbed him by the wrist, tugging him up to his feet. "It's too late for games," I whispered. "Children should be sleeping now." He tried to pull back, his bare feet dragging against the hard ground. "But she wants me to stay," he hissed urgently, glancing at the dark space beside him. I didn't argue, nor did I tell him there was no one there. I just bent down, lifted him into my arms, and held him against me as firmly as I could. He wriggled, small fists pressing against my shoulders, whining softly, the way he did when someone took his favorite toy. I walked fast through the open space, not slowing, not daring to look behind me. The wooden door groaned as I shoved it open with my shoulder, and my father stirred on his mat immediately, sitting up in the dim light. "What's going on?" His tone was thick with sleep. I lowered my brother quickly, tucking him under the thin quilt. "He was outside," I whispered, trying to keep my breath steady. Dad pushed himself up on one elbow. His face was a silhouette in the murk, but I could hear the sharp edge in his voice. "Outside? At this hour?" My brother rubbed his eyes, still pouting. "Cousin Ah-jun wanted to play," he mumbled. "She asked me to come with her. She said I can play with her forever." The words dropped into the room, sinking as a stone into water. My father's jaw tightened, his hand closing over my brother's shoulder. "No more," he said firmly. No anger, only the gravity of command. "You stay here." "Do you understand?" My brother blinked drowsily, nodded once and turned his face into the quilt. Within moments, his breathing slowed, drifting into sleep. I stayed awake long after. The sight of that emptiness burned into my mind. My father sitting rigid in the twilight beside us. Neither of us spoke. Words would have been useless. Breakfast was subdued that morning, too quiet. Usually, the table was full of clatter, bowls scraping, children chattering, my uncle laughing at his own jokes. But that day, even the cousins kept their heads down. My father ate in brittle composure, his chopsticks moving slowly, his glance flicking constantly to my youngest brother. Finally, he set his bowl aside and cleared his throat. "Elder brother," he said softly, "something happened last night." My uncle looked up, puzzled. "What is it?" "What happened?" My father hesitated. His gaze slid to my brother, who was busy chasing a bit of tofu around his bowl. Then he looked back at my uncle. "He went outside." In the middle of the night, my uncle frowned. "Outside? What for?" "He's only 5. My father's words fell to a lower pitch. "By the well." The chopsticks froze in my uncle's hand. "At the well?" My father's jaw was tight. "Yes," he said. I woke when I heard movement. He came back in with his sister, carried in from the courtyard. When I asked why he was out there, he said, my father paused, then forced the words through his teeth. He said cousin had called him out to play, that she wanted him to stay with her, forever. The room seemed to tighten around us. I could hear the faint clink of my aunt setting down the teapot. Her hand was trembling. My uncle stared at my brother, who kept eating, unaware that anything was wrong. "He said that?" he asked. My father gave a short nod. My uncle's voice sharpened. "Which cousin?" My father turned his head toward the little girl sitting beside me, busy with her breakfast. She blinked up in confusion, her cheeks stuffed with rice. "She was asleep," my father said flatly. "Didn't leave the room all night." And yet he swore she was the one outside with him. The color drained from my uncle's face. His chopsticks rattled faintly as he laid them down on the table. He turned, slowly, toward my father. "There was a girl," he said, his voice rough. "A few houses down, about her age." He nodded toward his daughter. "She fell into their well." It was years ago. My aunt gasped and covered her mouth. The cousins stopped eating and stared at him. My uncle continued. His voice dragged low. "Since then, sometimes neighbors say they hear a child at night. Laughing, playing. I thought it was nothing. Just stories to frighten children. But," he trailed off, shaking his head. The unspoken pressed down on us. My father's face was hard, his mouth a thin line. Finally, he said, "We're leaving." My uncle didn't argue. He only looked down at his bowl. His expression was tight with grief. And something else. Fear. That afternoon, we packed. The courtyard seemed darker. The gloom thickened as if the house itself was waiting. When we left, my little brother glanced back over his shoulder, his small stare fixed on the covered well. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just stared, as though listening for someone's laughter. But to us, the courtyard was empty. The rest of that morning felt strange, like the house itself was listening. My father's decision was final. We would leave that day. There was no discussion, no second thoughts. Uncle only nodded gravely, his face drained of color. We packed without a sound. Dampness clung to the courtyard, with the smell of moss and wet stone. Each time I stepped across the tiles to fetch something, I felt the covered well lurking at the corner of my vision. I didn't dare glance at it. Not even once. I just kept my head down, folding bedding, stuffing clothes into bags, tying them with a rope. Cousins hovered nearby, their usual chatter gone, quiet with the fear of drawing attention. By noon, the car was waiting at the edge of the road. We loaded our bundles quickly. The yard had been noisy and alive just the day before. Now seemed abandoned, as if it belonged to someone else. Perhaps it always had. The car jolted forward, wheels crunching on gravel, and the house shrank behind us. The fields stretched wide on either side, green under the punishing sun, bamboo groves whispering in the wind. But inside, there was no sense of freedom, only the unspoken between us. My little brother sat on my mother's lap, drowsy from the heat, his head resting against her shoulder. She stroked his hair absently, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. My father drove the car, one hand gripping the steering wheel, his face carved in stone. After a while, he began to ask, "What did she look like?" His voice was calm, but stripped of warmth. My brother stirred. "Like cousin Ah-jun," he said sleepily, naming our younger cousin. My father's eyes narrowed. "And what did she say?" "She wanted me to play," my brother murmured, half hiding his face against my mother. My father pressed on. "How many nights? How many times did you go out?" My brother shook his head, confused. "I don't know, she just came. She said I could stay with her forever." The word, forever, filled in the car, an echo that refused to die. My father kept repeating the questions, circling them endlessly, demanding answers a 5-year-old child could never give. But there was nothing more to tell. My brother only grew quieter. His eyes drooped shut. The car hummed on. Cicadas screamed from the trees. Their droning chorus rose and fell in waves. The smell filled the car. Dust and sun-warmed bamboo thick on the breeze. I sat pressed against the side of the seat, my palms damp with sweat, my eyes fixed on the fields rushing past. I didn't know if my brother was truly free of her, or if she still waited by that well, patient, smiling, ready to call him out again the next time the moon rose. None of us looked back.